section of Power Lunch. Azure Power Lunch, as you know, we record these calls and place our recordings on our YouTube channel. If you don't want to be recorded, you may want to drop off now. Okay, so let's start with our topic of discussion today, which is around API Center and how you can sync now APIs that are in API management to API Center. So this is a capability that is in public preview as we speak. API Center is generally available. Um, and what we're going to do today is, as a part of the agenda, we're going to do a quick level set on API Center, spend a few minutes, what it is, what it does, and then we're going to look at this capability, like what this capability brings to the table. And of course, it's a demo, and so and feel free to ask any questions. So let's talk about Azure API Center. What is Azure API Center? Azure API Center is a service which allows you to catalog, basically maintain and uh, inventory, track all your APIs, uh, do centralized governance for all your APIs in your organization. Because as we know, um, organization you have APIs from different sources. You may have APIs that are hosted in API management. You may have APIs that are running just in functions or running just on classic or legacy API, which are running in, um, uh, on a VM or AKS, or there may be some third-party services that you may be using, or they may be running in another cloud. So there are all these sorts of API. API Center can be a one-stop shop or one single pane of glass where you can come in and different stakeholders can come in and look at these APIs for different sort of reason. For example, your IT managers can come in and look at what different sorts of APIs are there and how they can make sure that they are meeting their organization's um, you know, security and compliance guidelines and all that. Then there are application developer who may want to find out what APIs they can use for their application. There may be API developers who are publishing those APIs there and all sorts of things. So all of these capabilities are a part of API Center. And just keep in mind that while preview, this service was free. Now it is available at a certain cost. Okay, so that's the API Center. Kind of a quick overview, and let's look at some of the quick capabilities. So as I said, you can do API inventory management, and this feature is related to API inventory management that we're going to be talking about. Then you have the real world API representation. What do you mean by that? What is meant by that is like, uh, how the API is, what is the API definition? I mean, it can be maybe it's a visual file, or maybe it's a OpenAI specification. So any sorts of these things. What is API governance? I mean, you can use linting to have API governance, like making sure that it's meeting your organization's compliance and security requirements and things like that. And we will look at some of these features in detail in future session. For example, there's a very interesting feature which allows you to use dev proxy and allows you to discover shadow APIs. So as I said, we will cover that. What is dev proxy and how you can use it to discover, along with API Center, discover shadow APIs. That's another thing that we will take a look at probably in a future session. So this one, we are going to be talking about how you can synchronize your API from API management. And just before we jump into it, let's talk about what are different things, what are different entities that you have in, or key concepts um, that you have in an API center. Um, That is, for example, you have the API, which is actually the core entity. This is can be a REST, SOAP, WebSocket, or gRPC API, and and it can be managed anywhere. It can be in API management or running as a part of Azure function or anything, or maybe a third-party API service. Okay, a version of an API, that's typically a version that depicts the life cycle. It can be production, test, or have certain features and things like that. An environment is actually where your API is residing. Environment can be API management or a virtual machine or anything like that. And that deployment that identifies exactly what is the runtime of your API. Okay, so it can be a URL to a function or URL to an API management URL or maybe a third party. And then that, that's where metadata and metadata schema, that's where this API Center clearly shines because you can add metadata so people can discover your API. You can enrich your API here. So basically, some of the metadata will come from when you import the APIs, and you can do it different ways. Um, um, but at the same time, you have this metadata that you can add to your APIs to help people discover, to help people know about more about the API. So let's say that you have to API that may look similar. Metadata will be the distinguishing feature so people, developers can look at it and discover, okay, yeah, this API does that. And this API, though they both seems like similar, the weather API, but one provides what information and what another API, what information that provides. So you can do all of these things as a part of API Center. So let's move on to the synchronization. Okay, so synchronization, why you need that? Before, I think we talked about it in the past, how you can, import APIs. There are ways using CLI to do that. There are ways using add-ins to do where you can add APIs to API Center. But a number of organizations are running API management, and they may be running multiple instances, and they want a way where developers, as they are using API management to front end their APIs, they want to have a way to do this more seamlessly, more easily. And that's where this feature comes in. So, what this feature allows you to do is you can link an API management instance to a API center. And at that moment, all the APIs will be synchronized to the that in the whatever in the API management will be synchronized to the API center. Okay, and it will create the entities, all the entities that we talk about: API version, deployment, environment, and all of that. So all of that will be created, and they will be created inside your API Center instance. Just keep in mind that if you add uh, an API in the linked API management that is linked to an API Center, what it's going to do is it's going to keep synchronizing. So I call it a live synchronization. It's not a one-time synchronization. It's a live synchronization. So anytime you add something, it will be added to the API Center side. If you delete something, it will be deleted. If you update something, let's say you add description to an API, it will be added to the API Center. But remember, it's one way. So if you add metadata on the API Center side, it will not propagate and go back to API management. So it's a one-way live synchronization. So just keep that in mind. And one other thing is there is no time for this synchronization. If you are doing this at this moment, while this is in public preview, it can take a few minutes or it can take a day. Okay, so that's what they're saying. Hopefully, as we move through the public preview goes to GA, we may get more concrete timeline. We can get see some status, how the synchronization is going, and things like that. Okay, so that's that. And let's talk about quickly before we jump into a demo about the. One second. Yeah, what entities are synchronized? So when you are doing the synchronization, the entities. I mean, this is quick summary. What entities come from API management? For example, API's title, description, kind will come from API management, while you can update summary, external documentation, custom properties in API Center. I'm not going to read this slide. This is just I want to provide it as a set of record. Like you can take a look and see what just for as a matter of record. Okay. Any questions so far, folks?
So
So
this
let's.
API center is dashboard, right? It is not like an operational thing where we can onboard any APIs or connect with the
No,
clients,
no.
etc.
Basically, what it is, as I said, it's an inventory management.
Okay.
Okay, so you have
True.
APIs that are spread all over your organization. You may have multiple API management instances. You may have multiple some APIs which are running in like VMs or something. They are not in the API management, or there may be some API that are running in third-party services. Okay, so you can put all of them together inside this single pane of glass, so you can see, okay, yeah, everything is here now and I can basically look at it and see what API I can use and I can apply governance and things like that. So you can do linting as well, and there so yeah, that you can do.
Okay. And what about the developer portal? So will those functionality be migrated to API center or?
That's a good question. Some of the functionality is definitely duplicate, and we will see. Let's see.
Oh, oh,
Probably
okay.
that's a topic for the other discussion later on. That's a good question. Yes. Hi, Brian. Go ahead, please ask your
Hey,
question.
sorry, I literally joined like 45 seconds ago. Yeah, so we've been looking into API Center as well. So I guess would it be safe to say, and you might have covered this, that API Center, we're viewing it as more design time, whereas the APIM is more runtime management.
That is right.
Would
That is right.
Okay.
Yes.
And did you
Yeah.
cover this so recently I think didn't you guys just develop a sync between the APIM and the API Center?
That's what
And
we
did
are
you
talking
cover
about
that?
today.
Oh,
No,
okay,
no,
I
no. That's
missed
what
it.
we're going
Okay.
to talk about it.
I
So,
was hoping to
yes.
see that. Okay, sorry. All right.
Yeah. No,
I'll
that's so. No, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
no, I'll look it up online. I wanted to ask you about it if you hadn't already covered it, so thanks.
No, yeah, we're going to talk about it. So, just a quick recap that API Center is your API inventory. On the other hand, API management, as you said, it's a runtime thing. And we are going to be talking about the sync between API Center and API management. And as I said, it's a one-way sync. So it syncs from API M to API Center, API management to API Center. And it's a live sync. So as you are adding, deleting, updating entity, the sync will happen. And let's take a look. So first of all, let's go in here and let's go to the portal. And before you do any synchronization, a few things that you will have to do. First of all, you have to enable managed identity on the API center. Okay. So given that you have created the API center, let's go in here and I am going to go in here in the API Center and I am going to go in and I'm going to create a managed identity. I already have one. So if you don't have one, just turn it on, have the managed identity ready. Okay. Then for this demo, I have an API management instance that is running. And what I'm going to do is I have to go into the access control and look at the role assignment and basically, I need to assign what I need to do is add role assignment. and I need to pick up API Management Reader role, then I need to pick up the managed identity. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to go into, I'm going to go into this subscription, and this is the API Center managed identity. And I'm going to assign this managed identity to this role. And folks, it's like, I just want to tell you this demo is about like kind of a, like when you are cooking show, like, baking a cake, you already have baked some cake. So basically, I already have that assigned. But in any case, what you will do is select and then you will review and assign. But I have already assigned it. Let me show you. Here is my managed identity from the API center that we were seeing, and I have assigned it to API Management Service Reader role. Got it? So that's you have to do. Once you are done with that, when it's done, just give it a couple of minutes, and then what you can do is you can go back to your API center, go to assets, and go to the environments and go to link. Okay, this is says preview. This is basically as it says link with API management, and that's where you will select your subscription. So I'm selecting the subscription. This is my resource group, and I have one API management instance here. For the sake of simplicity, I am gonna call it. Gonna keep everything the same, and I'm say include API definitions, and I'm going to create this. Okay. It will just, I want to let you know that it will take a few minutes before. In my case, when I was doing it, it took a few minutes when the APIs start showing up. So let's go back to the environments, and you see that there are, before there were no environments. Now we have two environments created. One is the linked environment, and this is by default. I didn't do anything here. One is the linked environment, which is kind of a identifying the link between your API center and your API management. And second one is the environment where you will see this is kind of the main thing. This is kind of placeholder where you will be linking, or everything else will be linked. So this is one thing. Okay, and let's go to the APIs. Okay, look, all of the APIs, and I'm gonna switch the screen for a second, and I'm gonna go in here. Look, I didn't have any APIs here. Now all of the APIs are synced. See, that's the cool part. I didn't have to do anything. I just went in, I synced it up. This API was already there in this one, but these APIs were not, and now all of the APIs are synced. And I what I can do is I can go in and for example, let me add a new API in here, okay, just to prove it out. I'm going to create an API. I'm going to call it APL API. It's just a demo, and the suffix is APL API. And let's uh, create this API. Okay, this API is created. So this is an APL API that is new. It's created. It's there now. Let's go back in here and let's refresh the screen. And I can tell you this: it takes a few minutes before this API shows up here. So please feel free to ask any questions that you may have.
So other
So
than syncing the APIs from APIM, so it has
Yes,
capabilities to connect with
yes, yes.
heterogeneous API gateways.
At this moment, APIM. That's the feature that is currently in public preview. Okay,
Okay.
there may be other features that come in the future, but at this moment, it's the APIM. Okay. Any other questions? I think there was somebody else who want to ask something.
Yeah, so it's pulling from multiple environments, right? I see the life cycle there. So it's one API center across my
Yep,
dev, QA, and prod.
that's right.
So
Yeah.
where is it picking up the environment from in the APIM? Like how is it determining that that it's a production APIM?
Basically, it's the, I mean, I'm not sure if when you see the screen, when it was pulling, for example, I'm just going to create a link. So this is coming from here. You can define environment type here. So let's say we have three API management instances. One is dev, one is QA, one is production. You will
Okay,
define it here. Got it? So this is basically, that's where you can set it, life cycle, blah, blah, blah. I mean, these things you can override what's coming from API. Okay. So basically it will,
got it.
you can assign it
Okay,
here. Got it?
okay, cool. Thanks.
That's, and when we go back to API, here we go. API is here. Okay. So if we click on this API and there is no description. So why there is no description? Let's go back here in my API management and I'm going to go to settings and I'm going to call it, this is a demo API. Okay. Let's save it. And once again, I mean, they're saying it takes, I mean, it can take up to a day, and maybe since it's public preview, so there's no SLA. But no, I mean, it's showing up pretty quick. So let's refresh it. And what I have seen is after some time, I mean, after a few minutes, it started showing up. So, just wait for a minute. But while it is doing that, let's go back to our API Center and start looking at some of the stuff that is populated. So these are my APIs. Let's go into one of those API demo conference API 2. And this is, this, so it has a description. It tells you what this available. These are different version. This is the main version, and it has the definition. And if we look at, it's an open API definition, and if we want to see it, look, this is the definition. So basically, end to end, you don't have to do any of that thing. Everything is transferred based on what you have in the API management. Got it? So that's what this syncing is allowed to do. It's a live syncing. You know, I don't have multiple API, but if you have multiple API management instances, it's going to be syncing from both. Okay. And let's see if the description is now. You see, this is demo API. So this description is now populated. What I'm going to do is now, I don't think I need this API. So I am going to go in and I am going to delete this API. Okay. So now this API is deleted from here. I can come in here and I can look at these APIs and let's refresh it. And look, that's very quick. The API is gone. So you see, it's one-way synchronization from your API management into API Center. It's live. So as you are making changes to your APIs, those API changes are showing up there, and that's in my opinion, it's very powerful. Now you can, if you have API management, you can start syncing those API and API Center and start making it the one-stop shop for all of your API inventory and kind of for people to access it and to take a look and see what APIs they can or they want to use or more to find out more information about the APIs. Any questions? So that's all I wanted to show. Let's do a quick recap. So as you know that Azure API Center is Microsoft service that talks about that allows you to do an intelligent inventory of your API, and you can basically do linting. You can discover your APIs there, and those APIs can be running in API management or on VMs or in third-party API runtimes. You can have one single pane of glass to see all of those API cataloged in API Center. The capability that we are talking about that allows you to synchronize API from an API instance is in public preview. It's a one-way synchronization from your API management to an API center, and it's a live synchronization. It's not a one-time thing. As you are adding, basically API center creates a link based on the identity. You have to give its identity access to the API management, and through that link, it constantly synchronizes API. So if you add an API, it will be added. If you remove an API, it will be removed from the API center. If you update an API, let's say description and things like that, those will be updated on the API center side as well. And here is the kind of a quick summary of what entities are synchronized. So that's all I have for today. Any questions? We have still 3 minutes. Okay. So if there are no questions, I will give everybody their 3 minutes back. Thank you for joining and have a wonderful rest of your day and a great weekend. And hope to see everybody next week for another session of Azure Power